This is the V-Spot. It's March 14th, 2014. I'm talking to Dale the Patriot Wilkes, former professional wrestler. How are you doing, Dale?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm real glad to finally be able to talk to you. I've been watching a lot of your All Japan matches.
Well, I appreciate that. I enjoyed my time working in Japan. As a matter of fact, of all the places and all the companies that I worked for, my favorite place was working in Japan. Worked with some great guys over there and a great company.
Yeah, I saw a match you and the Eagle had with Misawa and Kawada, and I just thought that was a really great tag team match.
Well, I had good people to work with. Working against the Japanese guys who I thought were the best in the world. They were tough. They were easy to work with, and of course, the Eagle. Jackie.
Yeah.
Great guy. Good worker, hard worker, tough guy. So when you've got people like that to work with and to work against, you usually end up having pretty good matches or pretty decent matches.
Let me ask you, this kind of jumping ahead here, but I'm curious, when you were working in Japan, were you working as a heel?
Well, over there, it's neither. When I worked for Baba, it was a little different. Things were done a little differently. There were clean finishes every week. Somebody got their hand raised, somebody got a 1-2-3 count. There was no outside interference. There was no DQs. There was no anything like that. Excuse me. And there was no baby face, no heel. It just, they didn't do it that way on our TV shows that came on every week was nothing but wrestling. There was no interviews. There was no talking with the wrestlers. So it's a little different than most wrestling fans have seen things done. But you could go to a town one night and you might be received as a heel, I guess, per se. And the next night you go to a different town, you might be a baby face. But really, as long as the match was good, the action was good, there really wasn't a heel babyface attitude with that crowd that attended All Japan shows.
I guess the reason I was asking was because seeing you in America, you were always a really good guy, and in Japan you seem to have more of a mean streak.
Well, and I'll tell you why. It was a much more physical form of work over there. We sold tickets. People watched our TV show based not on the other things. It was all about what was done in the ring. Now, therefore, because of that, it was a much more physical style of work. It was a lot harder on you physically, a lot harder on your body, but you could be a lot more aggressive. You wanted to portray. As a matter of fact, they expected it. And the next time you're watching any All Japan tapes, watch and notice how emotionless. There was no emotion from Misawa, Kawada. Now, Kabashi would show emotion.
Yeah.
But Kawaii, any of those guys showed absolutely no emotion, and that's just their nature. That's the way Japanese do things. But they wanted the Americans. They liked the Americans to be spirited, to be animated, to be aggressive. I mean, they just loved it. They would. I remember time and time again leaving the ring, walking back to the dressing room, or coming from the dressing room to the ring, and a Japanese put his hand on you and grab you, and you could just turn around and basically knock his teeth down his throat, bust his nose, black his eye, and they loved it. I mean, they absolutely loved it. So they expected and wanted to see more aggression out of the Americans because they didn't see that out of their guys.
When you went, because you did your first run in All Japan in like 92, 93, you went to WCW, and was it hard to adjust going back to an American style?
Well, I had come from an American style. Actually, the very first time I went to Japan was in 1990 as the Trooper, and I just wasn't prepared for that type of work. I was still green, so I didn't go back until 1992 as the Patriot. But, it didn't take me long to get back into the American way of doing things. My body needed a break. It's very tough physically on the guys that worked in Japan. So, maybe initially it was a little different, but it really didn't. I mean, I adapted pretty well. That's what I was brought up in, what I was trained in was the American way of doing things, sort of that walking and talking and stuff like that. So I adapted pretty quick.
Yeah, I know in WCW you wrestled Vader a couple of times, and I'm assuming that's probably not much different from All Japan.
No, it wasn't. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I've had a cold, but no. And I tell you, Vader had a reputation for being sort of rough, but very first time I worked with him in WCW, he crowbarred me pretty good. So I popped him right back upside the head as hard as I could, and that's basically just a way of saying, hey man, you need to lighten up. And he did. And I never had a problem with him after that. I worked with him in WWE several times, and matter of fact, for a brief period of time in WWE, we tagged up together on a few shows. But no, but yeah, you're correct. I mean, I never had a problem with him, but he was a little bit more like All Japan than what I was accustomed to.
If I can go back a little bit, how did you first get into the wrestling business?
Well, I'm from Columbia, South Carolina. Played football at the University of South Carolina. And I've always been a big wrestling fan. I grew up on Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. And, watching Abe Jacobs and Paul Jones and Wahoo McDaniel and the guys like that. And so I just a huge fan. I went to my very first show in 1970 at Township Auditorium here in Columbia and saw Jackie Jerry Briscoe take on Rip Hawk and Sweet Hansen. And I mean, I just was addicted almost from there. So I knew that whenever football ended for me, whether it was after college or after the NFL, I had a couple of tryouts in the NFL that didn't work out. So I came back to Columbia. Columbia is also the home, or was the home, of Lillian Ellison, who worked as the Fabulous Moolah. And she had a school in Columbia that trained pro wrestlers, and it was really more geared toward girls.
Yeah.
There had been some guys that had gone through it, but it was the only option I had here in Columbia. And there were some guys that helped train me that she would run on some of her local shows. So that's where I got my basic training. Probably not very good training, but, I learned the basics there, and that's where I started.
I would think you're probably her most famous male graduate, aren't you?
Yeah, without a doubt. And now she had some famous girls that went through there, but like I said, or like you said, I was, I guess the most well-known guy that went through her school.
How would the training differ? Were you in classes with other girls, or did she have a class for men and women?
No, the whole time I trained, I never saw a girl in the ring. It was just, I had a job at the time. I was in sales with a company here in Columbia. As soon as I'd get off work, I'd go to the gym and work out. And as soon as I got out of the gym, we'd head straight out to Moolah's. And a buddy of mine that graduated from the Citadel Military School in Charleston, South Carolina, he broke into the business with me. So we would go out there, and typically we wouldn't get there until 9 o'clock at night because I worked a full-time job, and I had to get in the weight room first, and then we'd go out there. But those guys that she would use on her shows, they would help train us, and they were probably very limited in their knowledge. But again, it was the only option I had living here in Columbia.
How did you get to? Was Memphis your first territory you got to work?
Was whose?
Memphis.
Yeah, it was the first well, yeah, it was actually. Let me back up. It's been a long time. Actually, the first territory that I worked was for Vern Gagne in the AWA. Moolah ran a show here in Columbia, ran it at an old skating rink, and she brought in Wahoo to work on top of that, work main event. I don't remember who he worked with, probably one of her guys. But at the time, Wahoo was in Charlotte for a few weeks where he lived, but he was also staying up in Minneapolis. He was booking for Vern Gagne and working for Vern Gagne. Well, on the show that night, we met, and we hit it off. Wahoo was a good dude, man, and he always had sort of a soft place in his heart for, guys, young guys in the business, guys that he thought had promise. And we also had something else in common that really helped us bond, and that was that high school, college, pro football background. And it just really took a liking to me. And so I went up and spent probably about 4 months living up in Minneapolis, renting a room from Brad Ringens, and working shows for Vern, but I was just doing it as Del Wilkes. And from there, I came home for Christmas, and they just didn't really have enough going on at the time for I could be up there full time and make money. So I came back home, and I don't remember how it happened, but somehow I ended up working in Memphis. So that was probably the second territory I worked with, would have been Memphis.
You teamed with Scott Steiner there, didn't you?
Yeah, they started out. I guess throughout my whole career, everybody's always tried to tell me something. When I first started working for Moolah, my buddy and I that graduated from the Citadel, she put us under hoods, and we were called the Masked Grapplers. Well, when I went to work for, in Memphis, the first thing I did was, and it was Lawler's idea, it was called the Dream Weaver, and I had a mask. Well, then they put me together with Scott Steiner, and we were called the Wrestling Machines, and I was under a mask. And, of course, later on, I worked as a Patriot under a mask, so I guess they were trying to tell me I had a face made for a mask. I was probably better off covering it up. But, yeah, I did work with Scott. We tagged together. Funny, we had a good crew there, guys that went on to have good careers. Scott was there.
Yeah.
Sid was there. Brian Lee was there. Of course, Jeff Jarrett was there. And Mark was there, Undertaker.
Yeah.
Of course, he obviously wasn't doing the Undertaker gimmick, but we were all young guys breaking into the business. But, you know, some good young talent there.
And the Godfather, Papa Shango, turned up there around that time.
He did. Yes, he sure did. He came through. And, of course, we had some of the older guys there, but, you know, Dundee and Lawler. And what's the Dutch Mantel was
and
there.
Robert Fuller.
And, Phil, what was Phil's name?
Hickerson.
Phil Hickerson. And so there was, you know, it was a good group of people there. It was, I starved to death. You know, they weren't drawing anybody. And it was tough, man. I mean, you know, our biggest house was always Monday night in Memphis, and we'd go to Louisville on Tuesday nights at Louisville Garden. We'd go to Evansville on Wednesday night, and then the rest of the nights were just spot shows, and we'd be back in Nashville on Saturday. We'd actually have TV in Memphis on Saturday at a TV studio, and then have to be back in Nashville that night to work the National Fairground. But, and, you know, we were paid based on where we were at on the card and based on the gate. And the most money I ever made in the night there was $50. Evansville, Indiana, man, I made $15-20. You know, I made $30 in Louisville, but I about starved to death working there.
Yeah, did you ever hear that? I heard this story that when Jerry Jarrett started working with the WWF in '92, that he came in the locker room and gave the guys a speech about how they can't do drugs, and Dutch Mantel said, "Jerry, you don't pay us enough to do food."
I didn't hear that, but that's, you know, I'm telling you, man, I literally had a few days off.
Yeah, that's
I had to come up to Columbia. I knew a guy that worked at the bank. And I had bought a car, and I'd gone through him to borrow the money to pay for the car. And so I had, you know, had good standing with him. And I literally had to take out a small loan just so I could afford gas, hotel, and food, man. And there were some times I didn't get a hotel. I can't tell you how many times after the show I would drive to the next town or close to this town, and I'd pull into a rest area, and I had my pistol in my lap. I locked my doors, and I'd go to sleep, and I'd get up the next morning, and I'd go find me a place to eat. I'd go find the gym where I could work out and where I could take a shower. I couldn't afford it, so I slept in my car a lot.
What did you learn? Did Memphis help you learn a lot about working?
Repeat that, please.
Did Memphis help you? Did you learn a lot about wrestling in Memphis? Learning how to work?
I apologize. I didn't understand the question.
Oh, I said in Memphis, did you learn a lot?
I'm sorry, brother.
No, that's all right. No, I was just saying, did you get any, when you were working in Memphis, did you gain experience?
Oh, okay. I apologize.
That's all.
I'm on the road, and I got traffic around me. Well, I don't know. I was sort of behind the 8 ball anyway, because you take a lot of guys that went through WCW school, the Monster Factory, or Sharp's school. They probably got much better training than I did. I was trained by guys that never made a nickel in this business. And and I'm sure it showed, but yeah, I did. I learned things there. Absolutely. I feel like I learned something at every stop along the way. I tried to be sponge-like and take things in and watch and learn. But, so yeah, I mean, it wasn't, it wasn't a bad experience. It was just one where I couldn't make any money, and basically I almost went broke trying to work there. Hey, listen, when they fired me, I was relieved. They came in one day and had this old skinny guy that I don't know, about 6'3", weighed about 130 pounds, a guy named Randy Hale. I don't know where his wrestling knowledge came from, but he was sort of one of the bookers there, and he came in one day and told me that I just, needed to head back home. They didn't think I was, had a career in that business, and I didn't say anything, but I wanted to go, man, thank you. At least I can go home now and get 3 meals a day, have a bed to sleep in.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Sometimes you're in a situation where you don't necessarily want to quit, because you don't want to quit, but you're happy somebody stops you.
Oh yeah, and I knew I wasn't gonna quit, and I wasn't discouraged that they, let me go and fired me, and but I knew I'd get back home and I'd find another place to go. I knew I still had that connection with Wahoo, and so I could get back up and work with Vern and them if things picked up, which I eventually did. That's where the trooper gimmick came along. But so yeah, I wasn't discouraged, but a little bit relieved. At least I could get home and have 3 hots in a cot.
When you got to the AWA, who came up with the trooper gimmick?
Well, they did. One of Moolah's guys that helped train me worked full-time as a deputy sheriff, and still does, in one of the neighboring counties here. So when he worked, those shows that Moolah would run just here in the area, high schools or National Guard armories, he would work as the super enforcer. He was a cop in real life, so he had the outfit, he had everything. Well, he called me one day when I was up there working for Vern and them, and I was just working for Wilkes, and I was back. Second time I've been up there. He said, hey man, if I send you a videotape, he said, would you mind passing it on to Wahoo? He said, if you recall, I met him, but not you did, when he worked for Moolah down here. And I said, hey man, I don't have a problem. His name's Alan. I said, send it up and I'll give it to Wahoo. Well, he sent the tape up. I passed it off to Wahoo. About 3 or 4 days later, Greg called me into the office. He said, come in, I need to talk to you. He said, that tape you sent us? He said, we have no interest in that guy. He said, we don't think he's right where he needs to be, working weekends in Columbia, South Carolina. He goes, but we do like the idea of the gimmick. And he said, we got an idea. We want to see what you think about it. It's called the Trooper. You're going to look like a highway patrolman. You got that southern accent. He said, I think it'd be a perfect fit for you. Well, listen, if they were thinking about using me and putting the gimmick on me and giving me a push, I was all for it. As long as I wouldn't have had to put a red wig on and a red nose on my face, I'd have done anything. So I was all in. So that's where that came from. It was their idea through a tape that a buddy of mine sent.
When he found out that you were going on TV with the gimmick, did he have a problem with it?
Oh yeah. And listen, he's a good dude and a good guy. And I could understand why he felt that way. And I told him, I said, man, I had no clue. I said, I did exactly what you asked me to do. You sent me the tape. I gave it to them. And I said, they were the ones that approached me about this. I said, this wasn't my idea. It was theirs. And I think at first he didn't believe me, but, I was telling the truth.
Yeah, it had to be a pretty awkward position to be in.
Yeah, It was, and I hated it for him, but listen, it was an opportunity for me.
Yeah. Now, you ended up winning the AWA tag team titles, didn't you?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, DJ Peterson and I were the very last tag team champs there. It wasn't very long after that that I went back to Japan, maybe went to Japan as the trooper, and then the company folded. But, DJ and I were the last tag team champions in the company.
You won the belts from the Destruction Crew, right?
Yeah, Enos and Bloom.
Okay, now, do you remember why they put the belts on you? Because I remember they were champions for a long time, and I know they were even moonlighting in WCW under mask.
Yeah, they were, but, DJ was a good worker. He had some fire about him in the ring, and of course, I was still green, but they felt like I had some potential and, physically looked good, and so they just wanted to give us a push. They really didn't have any other, top babyface teams. They would bring people in occasionally, but you can't put a belt on somebody that you bring in and
right.
It's on your TV show, but maybe once every 6 months. They'd bring rock and roll in every now and then. So they needed a good young, babyface team, and they felt that it was, the right thing to do at the time, I guess.
After you got done with the AWA, did you mainly work in Japan before you got the Global?
Well, I went to Japan that one time in 1990, I think it was, and I worked as a trooper. And like I was telling you earlier, I was not prepared for what I saw when I got there. Those long matches with 15,000 false finishes and 15,000 kickouts, and the physicality of it. And I just wasn't prepared. I was still wet behind the ears, and so I didn't hear from them for 2 years. They wouldn't even contact me. All Japan would. But so I started working independent shows, and then along came Global. Yeah, Global came up next. So I went to them, and I'll be honest with you, I don't remember who got me booked there. It may have been Joe Pedicino called me up and said, I've got an investor. Bill Eby and I are going to bring in some talent. We're going to be on ESPN. We got the old AWA spot on ESPN from 4 to 5 o'clock Monday through Friday. And so he said, we're going to send you a ticket and want you there for the first show, the first taping. And I went out with my trooper stuff, a gimmick, because I thought that's what they wanted me to do. And I was in my room. We stayed at a Roadway Inn. All the talent did, and so did Joe and Bill and everybody. And Joe called my room. He said, I need you to come over to my room. Bill and I are over here in Bonnie Blackstone. He said, there's something we want to talk to you about. And I said, okay. So I came on over. Now, this is literally, 4 or 5 hours before we're to go to the venue that night and tape and have our first show. We got a crowd there, too. He said, there's a little old guy in Georgia. His nickname's Po Man. And he said he's just a weekend warrior. He's 5'0" and he's about as round as he is tall. And he does a character called the American Patriot. And it's red, white, and blue mask, red, white, and blue tights. And keep in mind, too, the timing of it. Wrestling has always done a good job of taking advantage of the political climate. Russia during the Cold War, Nikita Koloff and Sergeant Slaughter, the Iron Sheik and Sergeant Slaughter, whatever was going on politically, internationally, wrestling's always done a good job of taking advantage of that and having a good guy and a villain. And this is when Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait, and we had gone into Kuwait to liberate Kuwait, and patriotism was, just through the roof in this country. And Joe and Bill said, look, man, we think this would be an unbelievable gimmick for you. And they already had a costume box there with the tights and the mask that would fit me. And they said, would you do it? And I said, yeah, absolutely. They said, listen, man, we want to give you a big push here. And that night when I went down and walked through the curtain and went down the aisle there at the sportatorium, those people had never Patriot before. They had no idea who I was, and that place erupted. I mean, it just took off. It blew up, and we were convinced we'd made the right move. But no, that was their idea.
I remember when I was about, I think I was probably 10 or 11 when Global was on, because I remember I was amazed they had wrestling on weekday afternoons.
Right.
You know, because for a kid, you know, usually I had to wait Saturday. I always said the longest thing on Saturday was WWF Superstars ending and WCW beginning. It was the longest 5 hours of the week.
Oh, I know, but yeah, you're right. You could watch it, you know, Global Monday through Friday from 4 to 5. But
yeah, and when I saw,
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say when I saw the Patriot come out, it was like I was immediately taken because it was such a cool look. It looked like literally a superhero come to life.
Yeah, in the first few weeks I did it, it looked sort of odd. The outfit did. When they initially pulled all the stuff out of that costume box they had shipped to Dallas, there was a red, white, and blue tights. It was actually a red, white, and blue vest, a red, white, and blue mask, and then a red, white, and blue smokestack hat like Uncle Sam wears. You know, like the black one Abe Lincoln wore in all those pictures. And I told him, I said, look, I'll wear every piece of that. I said, but I'm not putting that hat on my head. I said, I'll look like some of my Dr. Seuss book. I'm not doing that. So you can keep that hat, put it back in that box, but I'll wear the rest of it. Well, at the time, all I had was black boots. So about the first month, I was wearing black boots with red, white, and blue tights and a red, white, and blue mask. And it took me a while to order my red, white, and blue boots to go with it. So it was a little odd-looking combination there at first.
When you were working there, Bill Eadie was the first booker there, wasn't he?
Yeah, he and Joe Pedicino, yeah.
How was he to work with? Because I'm a huge Demolition fan, and I loved him as Masked Superstar. So I was curious, how was he to work with as a booker?
Bill's a good dude. He's easy to get along with. He's got a lot of knowledge. He's, you know, sort of a soft-spoken guy. He never gets, you know, his emotions. He's always on even keel. And I like Bill. You know, been a few years. I saw him here in Columbia 6-7 years ago. But it was easy. It was good to work for Bill.
Did you ever get to work with him? Because I think he was working in Global as Access, the Demolisher.
Yeah, I worked with him when the first few weeks when we were having that. Excuse me, we were obviously working in front of a live crowd there at the sportatorium, but we were, you know, filming everything and putting it in the camera where we could show it on TV later in the week. And they were doing this basically. Well, most of us were, but you know, he's working 2 or 3 times a night. It was sort of like a tournament, an elimination tournament to get down to the final 2 for the North American heavyweight belt, or the TV belt. And so, yeah, during that process, I worked with Bill. I worked with Soul Taker, who was, you know, eventually Papa Shango. I worked with, I worked with Buddy Landell. I worked with Al Perez. I worked with Stan. What's Stan's name from Midnight Express?
Lane.
Stan Lane. So, yeah, I worked with a lot of good guys. And then they eventually, you know, it came down to me and Al Perez, and they put the belt on me. But, yeah, I worked with Bill during that process.
How would they I'm curious about different promotions. How did Global go about putting their matches together? Were you given more freedom to do stuff in the ring, or would they map it out?
You got to finish, you know, from them the way they wanted the finish to happen. Then after that, it's just up to you and the guy you're working with to go out there and, you know, have a match. But basically, the only instructions we had was the finish. Here's what we need. Here's how we have to have it happen. And as a matter of fact, one of the finishes, the first time they put the belt on me, working against Al Perez. It was supposed to be a deal where we're laying right near the ropes, and I'm covering Al, and the referee is counting, and he doesn't see that it's 1, 2, and then right before the 3 count, Al puts his foot on the ropes, but the ref doesn't see it. He counts Al out. I get up, and I've got the belt. They, you know, puts the belt on me, and it doesn't bury Al. Everybody on TV could see, everybody in the building could see that he had his foot on the rope, but the ref didn't see it. Well, the ref was a little green as well. Well, he actually looked up before the count of three and saw Al's foot on the rope and counted him out anyway. So, you know, I jump up, and the place blows up, they're all excited, and they put the belt on me. Well, because it was a messed up finish, and the ref saw and looked up when he wasn't supposed to, we did a deal where I cut an interview, and I said, look, I will not take the belt under these circumstances. You know, I believe in doing things the American way, the right way, and, his foot was on the rope. I saw that clearly once I went back and looked at it on film, and I don't deserve the belt. I'm going to hand the belt back in, and we're going to do it again. And so, it created a little angle there, and then we worked I guess the next week or 2 weeks later, and they put the belt back on me.
It was one of those things, and this would go back to your WWF run. You were always kind of a different kind of babyface because you weren't as necessarily as aggressive or maybe xenophobic as some other patriotic characters. Like, I remember I always liked that in the WWF because I felt like you were the only good baby faces in the WWF in '97 because you said, I don't have a problem with Canadians or anybody.
No, and that was, I felt like the way the character should be presented. And, in a lot of my interviews, I made the point that, to me, patriotism is love of country. And, there are no boundaries for that. I mean, that just doesn't exist inside the boundaries of our country. I mean, people all over the world, a lot of them love where they're from. They love their country. So patriotism is all over the world. And, I tried to present the character in that way that, he didn't denigrate other people or run down other people, maybe individuals like Bret Hart or things like that. But no, I certainly tried to do that in a way where, it would be a character that would appeal to all, regardless of nationality.
When you, the whole thing with Al Perez, that ended up getting you the Pro Wrestling Illustrated Inspirational Wrestler Award. Was that a big deal for you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about, a guy that, I knew nobody in that business. I had no family in that business. Whatever little bit of success I had, came through hard work and through dedication and through trying to do things the right way. So to have that presented to me that was a big deal to me. Absolutely. And back then, the wrestling magazines were still a pretty big deal. I mean, that was,
definitely.
In the infancy of computers and stuff like that, really, and the internet. So a lot of people still bought the publications and the magazines, and I think that was probably one of the better selling magazines was PWI.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
that was like
I took that as a big deal. Sure did.
Yeah, because when I was a kid, the magazines in fact, I've started collecting them again, and I feel like that's actually a good way to get a pulse of what was going on in wrestling at the time.
Right.
Better than TV or anything, because, it's a tapestry, but if you get those magazines, you get an idea of what the fans are going for, because, they're not going to put something in the magazine if it's not going to sell.
No, and I'll tell you, what I would do as a kid, when Saturdays was the day, my mom worked, both of my parents worked 9-to-5 jobs, so the only opportunity my mom would have to go to the grocery store, and this is way, way back before 24-hour Walmarts. I was born in 1961, so this is in the late 60s, early 70s. We'd go to the grocery store on Saturdays, and in grocery stores, and they still do. Back then, though, they were always in the front of the grocery stores, the magazine racks.
Yeah.
And while my mom was getting groceries, I would just sit there and look through every wrestling magazine on that rack, and just those guys in those magazines to me were just larger than life. I mean, I was a huge sports fanatic as a kid, and I would get Streets and Smith baseball, Streets and Smith football, basketball, and loved football. But to me, those guys that were in the wrestling magazines were the coolest, biggest, baddest dudes of any sports book that I looked at. There was just something about them. And I would just sit there mesmerized looking at those wrestling magazines. So, yeah, I know exactly where you're coming from about those.
Well, I remember I was about 7 or 8. I was in Gunnersville, and when I was a kid, I'd go look at the magazines, and my mama would tell me to come on, and I remember I accidentally stole 2 magazines doing that because I was just so enthralled in it, and I really didn't mean to. I just walked out to the car looking, and then I got in the car, I said, oh no, and I tried to take it back, and my mother was already halfway home, and she was exhausted. She said, forget it, just buy one next time.
Yeah. Yes, I know.
Okay, Bill Eadie left eventually. Eddie Gilbert became the booker in Global.
Right.
Okay, what did anything change for you when Eddie Gilbert came in?
Well, Eddie had that. You could tell Eddie had that Memphis blood running through his veins because it was later on then when Eddie and Doug got there that they did the deal, the angle where the Dark Patriot sprayed something in my eye, mysterious mist, and I think they even used some flash paper a couple of times. So just stuff that came from Memphis that you would see guys do in Memphis. Nothing wrong with that, just a different way of doing things. But yeah, I mean, you could see, the difference in Eddie's way of thinking and doing things.
Yeah, I actually had Doug Gilbert on the show about a year ago, and he talked about enjoying working with you.
Yeah, I liked Doug. Hadn't seen Doug in a number of years, liked Eddie, and then, enjoyed working with Eddie. And, just unfortunate that, died young.
Yeah.
As have so many guys in that industry.
Yeah, I was looking at something the other day, and I was thinking about Andre the Giant. He was only 42 when he died.
Yeah, I saw Andre not long before he died because he would come over and work a couple of tours a year for Baba. And wouldn't work the whole tour. He'd come in maybe about halfway through a 3-week tour, maybe work the last week. And actually had the opportunity to work with him in some tag matches. Probably 3 or 4 times they put me and me and Andre together and some tag matches. And so I'm glad that I got to know him and work with him and be around him.
Were you partners or were you working against him?
No, we were partners.
Okay.
Yeah, now one time we worked a 6-man tag match against each other. I don't know who the other guys involved were, but he was one of, 3 and I was one of 3. But all the other times, it was he and I together as a tag team working against other guys.
That had to be a big honor to get to work with Andre the Giant because even at the end, he was still such a larger in life, a huge star. I mean, he just gave across an aura about him.
Yeah, it was. And again, for me, I got in the beginning of my career, and I got to work with guys that I sat on the floor of a grocery store while my mom shopped, and I saw these guys in magazines. Andre being one of them, Wahoo being one of them, Harley Race. I got to work with Harley against Harley Race. Dory Funk. How many times I worked with Dory? So it was. I mean, it was an honor that I'm being able to work with guys that literally, as a 10-year-old kid, a 12-year-old kid, I'm thumbing through magazines just, amazed by these guys, and now I'm getting to work with them. So, yeah, certainly Andre fell in that category. And I think as anybody that's ever met Andre or been around Andre would say, just an absolute class guy. I mean, a true gentleman.
If I can go back to Global for a second, how was it, what did you think when you first heard about the Dark Patriot angle?
I thought it was a good idea. I thought it was a real good idea. There was nothing else there really, or no other reason there that you could come up with for a hot angle or some heat with other guys. I mean, Scotty the Body. I mean, what's he going to be there? I mean, I worked against him a few times. John. What was his name? Anyway, I thought it was a good idea. John who?
Tatum.
Yeah, John Tatum. I've worked Tatum a few times, but he was more goofy, with the way he did things in the ring. So, I mean, it made sense. I thought it was pretty logical.
Yeah, I've always really liked. I'm a sucker for mask and also evil hero things. Like the dark side of someone.
Well,
or the dark side.
Absolutely, and if you can't have a good villain without a good guy, you can't have a great good guy without a real bad guy. I mean, that was basic stuff back in the early days of movies. The white hat cowboys and the black hat cowboys. It was distinct lines, good versus bad.
Now, were you there? Were you still there when Eddie Gilbert ended up leaving? Because I believe the money dried up in Global at that time, like the investors pulled out or something.
Well, the investors that they thought they originally were going to get was some rich guy from Africa, and I don't know if that was a work. I don't know if they were being played, let alone but it ended up being a lady from Atlanta, Carol Lindsay, and who had some money, but she wasn't a rich lady by any means. And it was her money that ran out. But I'm pretty sure that I may have left by that time because, doing the Patriot gimmick, and it had really become a popular character, popular gimmick, and my career was really starting to take off. So that was the time. Jimmy Suzuki was the guy that originally got me booked in Japan. I don't know if you know Jimmy, but he worked for one of the magazines in Japan, but he lived in Dallas. And so when that very first tour I did as the Trooper really didn't go well, I never heard from him again until I started working for Global, and they saw Jimmy sent them some of my tapes, and I didn't know that he had. And he called me back. He said, "Look, you've gotten better. You've gotten experience. You know, they love it. They want you to come back to All Japan." And I'm pretty sure I left Global. Baba had asked me to come there before Eddie left, I think.
Okay, because I was just wondering about that, because I remember it was the whole thing, because I think Eddie was the champion there, and he left with the belt.
Yeah, I think all that happened after I left. I'm pretty sure it did.
When you got to All Japan, were you more prepared this time?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I made sure. I watched tape out of my ears. And plus, it's like anything. No matter what you do, if you're if you're a car salesman, if you're a football player, if you're a businessman, early in your career, you're not that good. You get better as you gain experience. So just through doing it longer, I was better and had better psychology of the business. And I went in my first tour back, and immediately, I was working with the top guys there. ASAP. I'm working in matches with Gordy and Doc, and working in matches with Hanson and Johnny Ace, and working in matches with Kabashi and Kawada. And, they had me with partners like Johnny Smith and things like that. But yeah, eventually, working semi-main event matches, literally within a week of being there.
Yeah, I saw one match one of the matches I saw was a match you had with Stan Hansen, and, I really enjoyed it, because, it was just some real hard-hitting action.
Yeah. Jackie Fulton told me one time after Stan and I had worked together, and it was basically just a chop fest. And I started taking my open hand and just slapping Stan across his chest instead of going sideways and chopping him. And Stan was easy to aggravate. You could get under Stan's skin real quick, and I like him, think a lot of him. He's a good man. But he said it was just crack, crack, crack. He said, man, you guys were just wearing each other out. But yeah, listen, it was, again, it was a privilege to work with Stan. There's never been an American that's worked in that country that's as iconic as Stan is. Stan is godlike in Japan.
The one thing I was really impressed about watching the match is that sometimes Stan Hansen will take on guys, particularly any Americans they bring in, and it seems like the other guy can't quite get credibility when he's beating up Hansen, but when you were beating up Hansen, it's like, I completely bought it, because you looked like a dude that could give as good as he gets.
Well, a lot of times Stan wouldn't sell for guys. Stan, I remember one time I went out over there. I don't know who my partner was. It may have been Johnny Smith. But we worked against the Fantastics, against Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers. And I think I let them give me a double hip toss. I wasn't going to let either one of them because of their size. I respected those guys. They were good workers, but they were small. And I wasn't going to let either one of them body slam me or suplex me or, I wasn't going to take a bump for either one of them. But I did let them give me a double hip toss. Well, once the match was over, Stan pulled me aside and he said, man, you can't do that. He said, those guys are midget-like. He said, I don't care if they both of them give you a hip toss. He said, just don't sell it. Just block it. And he said, so I learned things like that from Stan. And if Stan had respect for you, Stan would work with you. He'd sell for you. But if he felt it was going to be anything to hurt his image and to hurt his character and to hurt his gimmick, he wouldn't budge. I mean, his boots would be nailed to the canvas. But I always felt like there was a mutual respect there between Stan and I.
Yeah, well, you got to look out for yourself because you know, it's most things in life, you know, if you're too giving, people don't respect it.
No, absolutely not. And Stan had a lot of heat with some of the guys over there because Stan would do things like that. Stan, listen, I can't tell you how many times I've been in a tag match against Stan, where, let's say Stan's partner was Barry Horowitz and my partner was Jackie Fulton. And they wanted to start the match. And they had this huge spot worked out for the first, or series of spots for the first few minutes of the match. Well, immediately when they would lock up, Stan would just come blowing in the ring and just beat both of them up. I saw him beat Horowitz up one night and throw him out of the ring. He beat Jackie up and threw him out of the ring and motioned for me to come in, and we just started all over. So Stan did what was going to be best for Stan.
How would All Japan put together matches?
Well, you had a finish. They would come to you and give you a finish. But, again, that was up to you and the guys you were working with to do everything in between. But now, if it were TV, or if it were a show in the three big cities, Tokyo, Osaka, or Nagoya, didn't even have to be TV. But when we worked those towns, there was always some of our biggest houses, most rabid fans. Your matches were, I mean, you knew what was going to happen from beginning to end. I mean, there was no room for error. And, I mean, I've had plenty 30-minute matches where, I mean, you had to know everything from the first minute to the 30th minute. But otherwise, if it were just a house show somewhere, a spot show somewhere, then, you know, you just come up. Literally, they'd walk in and say tonight, you know, Patriot, you know, you catch Kamala, you know, and then they'll let you guys come up with it like that. And the Baba or Fuchi, none of those guys that were, you know, really in charge there ever told you what. They just said who was going over, who wasn't. That was basically it. It was up to us to come up with the finish.
Something I've been curious about, because I know today, or at least for the last 15 years on WWE, they have, like, the referees have earplugs to keep up with the time of the match. How back then would they, because I guess they would probably give you, like, they'd say you got 15 minutes or something. How would they keep up with the time?
Well, when I was working for WWE and even WCW, they had earplugs in.
Okay.
Yeah, and you had guys back behind the curtain on the monitor, you know, with a headset on that would tell. But now when I worked in Japan and other places like that, you would just tell the refs, hey, you know, give me a cue at 15, give me a cue at 10. And the best referees, I'm telling you, it's not even close. The best referees were the referees in All Japan. And they knew every single move. Like I told you earlier, if it was a 30-minute match and it was TV and I had to have everything memorized, and so did the guys I was working against, so did the referees. They were phenomenal. And, of course, there was somebody that was standing, you know, back in a doorway somewhere, and they would look up and they'd give them a cue when they needed it. But those referees in Japan didn't miss anything. They were unbelievably good.
When you were, another match I saw was when you got to work Kenta Kobashi one-on-one, and Kobashi almost, because I remember when I first got into Japanese wrestling, he wasn't necessarily a favorite of mine, but over time he's grown on me, especially when he's working with Americans. He seems like he seems much more animated, like you said earlier.
Yeah, he was one of the few Japanese that would show emotion, and he had good fire and good emotion. Toughest human being that I have ever worked with. Probably one of the nicest guys I've ever worked with. Worked against him. They tagged us up together for a while as tag team partners. Later on, it was me, him, and Johnny Ace as tag team partners. But I'm telling you, he'd let you do anything to him. He never complained. I mean, just physically one of the toughest human beings. And I think, in my opinion, one of the greatest workers I've ever watched work.
Yeah. Now, how much English did the All Japan guys know?
They knew enough to communicate. You know, but the top guys Misawa,
Yeah.
Cowie, Kawada, you very seldom sat down with them and went over a finish. Now, Kabashi would. Kabashi would come into your room and go over the finish if you were working against him to make sure he got it right. But the other three would. You'd never see them before you went to the ring. The referees would bring the finish over. And, you would, if there was something you wanted to change or if you wanted to input something, that was fine. But the referee would run and deliver it from their locker room to our locker room. And so that's why I'm saying these referees were good. They had these matches memorized as well. But, no, you never went over anything with Kawada, Cowie, and Misawa. Never saw them.
No, go ahead.
No, I said you never saw them. It was amazing. When I first started tagging with Kabashi, it was funny. I would have to ride the Japanese bus, which was the most boring thing. They don't talk. They don't communicate with each other. Then you get on the American bus after a match, and, it's beer, it's screaming, yelling, laughing, high-fiving, music playing. And it was a rowdy scene, and you're on that bus, and it's just like a funeral home, but just the difference in culture.
Did the Japanese wrestlers socialize with the American wrestlers after shows?
No. They were on separate buses. They stayed in separate hotels, typically in a separate part of the town. And so, no, we would very seldom see. One of the few times that we did, Cowie and I got to be pretty good buddies, and a couple of times he and his wife invited me and Johnny out, took us out, actually had us over at their home one time, took us out and fed us on a couple of other occasions, gave us some nice gifts. So I socialized with Cowie on a few occasions. The only other time I ever socialized with any of them, and he had the least personality of any of them, was Kawada. But one night, Ace and I had been out and had been drinking, and we called him at about 2 o'clock in the morning, called his hotel room, and told him he was scoutless if he didn't come out and meet us. 30 minutes later, he showed up, and we stayed out till about sunup. But that's the very few occasions we'd ever socialize with him.
Were there any, and I'm always curious about this, about the Japanese, were there any politics in Japanese locker rooms compared to America?
No. None.
All right. Now, around this time, when did you get the offer to go to WCW?
Well, when I worked when I was doing the Trooper in the AWA, Eric Bischoff was our color analyst. He was our voice on the show, so I knew Eric from there. And he contacted me. He had just got the job. One was there, and WWF actually run seat.
Yeah.
So he called me and said, "Look, man, it didn't work over you." And I wanted to get back to the States again. I always preferred working in Japan, but you'd be gone for 3 or 4 weeks at a time, and it was just tougher on your body.
Yeah, it had to run you ragged.
I was ready to get back to the States where I could see my family more. I had young kids.
Yeah.
And I was ready for something that was less taxing on my body, which the American way of doing things in pro wrestling is a lot easier on your body. So I was ready. I was ready to get back.
Yeah. Now, when you first came in, you were doing singles matches, and eventually they paired you with Marcus Bagwell.
Yeah, they did. And Greg Gagne was one of the bookers. It was booked by committee then, and Greg was there. And of course, I had a good relationship with Greg, and I knew Marcus from the global days.
Right.
I him in, and he worked as a handsome stranger. And they said, "Look, man, we need a good babyface tag team here." He said, "Would you be opposed as if we put Marcus with you?" And they already had the idea. They said, we're going to base it on your gimmick, the Patriot, and he's going to be in red, white, and blue tights, and call it Stars and Stripes. And